Alright guys, this is Ingus here and welcome to my brand new series. Well, in this series I want to tell you everything you need to know about competitive battling, especially in the NU tier. Bleh. But yeah, because I'm best in the NU tier, but once we've covered all of that, I'm gonna move on to RU, UU, OU and eventually Ubers. So yeah, this is gonna be the very basic beginner's guide for never used. So what do you need to know, which Pokemon should you use or not use, everything like that will be covered in this series. And in the first episode I have some pretty basic stuff, what you need to know to become a competitive battler. So first of all, as you can see, you just need to know the types. Like this is, I almost want to say that this is the most important thing. Like you need to know that, I don't know, grass is super effective against ground, or you're gonna switch out if you have the advantage or stuff like that. So types are really essential. And then I tried to make these in order, like what is more important and less important, but after all, everything of these points will be really important. So first of all, of course, the Pokemon, the moves, I mean the types and the general stats. So, you know, if you see a Charizard, you need to know that it's like fire, flying, and you must use stone attacks or rock type attacks rather, or that stealth rocks would be pretty useful, or that you can hit it with water types, but that, I don't know, grass types should retreat. You just know which Pokemon you're facing, because it's not fun to Google that every single time you face a new Pokemon. You know, that takes a lot away of the fun aspect of the game. So second, you can already see that because it's kind of difficult to scroll that down in a way that you can't see the next point already. So movesets and abilities. What could the enemy do and what can you do? So to give an example, if you see a Haunter in Never Used, okay, you need to know that, okay, most likely it's gonna either use a Substitute along with Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb and maybe Disable, or it could use more of a all-out offensive set, so it could use Thunderbolt and stuff like that, and it could even be Choice Scarf because it's a really fast Pokemon, you know? And like you can't bring in a, I don't know, let's say you want to wall it with Alomomola probably because it doesn't take super effective damage from it, but then it just T-bolts because like the Pokemon can not only use the attack moves which are the same type as the Pokemon itself, so you need to be aware of the Pokemon's coverage moves. So that was a bit of a bad example, but I had to come up with one immediately, so yeah, hopefully you get what I mean. So next up are EVs. EVs are really essential to know because like if you don't use correct EVs on your Pokemon, they're gonna be much worse than they're supposed to be, and you need to know the possible EV spreads of the enemy. Like, is this a fast Pokemon? Is it generally slow but has a lot of speed EVs in order to outspeed certain threats? You need to know stuff about EVs, and if you don't know what EVs are at all, you probably should watch one of the videos on YouTube. There are already a lot of videos that explain exactly what EVs are, so I'm not gonna cover that in this series because, yeah, you can just watch another video to know that. So, yeah, it's not necessary for me to explain that. So, next up is the metagame. You need to know which are common threats and what do people play often, and which Pokemon do you absolutely need a counter for and which can handle otherwise. You know, like the most offensive threats in Never Used, like for example, you need a counter for Jinx. If you don't have a counter for Jinx, she can sweep your entire team, you know? But compared to, I don't know, a Pokemon that has very little usage, like Stantler for example, you don't need a counter for that because like Stantler is weak as it is, so it might die to a random attack that you have, or you most likely will have a fighting type on your team, so you don't need to cover these Pokemon that are really not played a lot, but you need to cover the most common threats. And well, then you need to have knowledge about team building. You know, you can't just shuffle a few pokes that you like together and hope that it works, and you can have flawless games with bad teams and still lose because the team just doesn't work, you know? But team building, well, I'm gonna cover team building in this episode, but concrete team building, especially for beginners, will be covered in the next episode. So I'm gonna create a team then, and we're gonna play with it and see how it rolls. And you know, generally about team building, like the metagame in NU is really offensive, but I think for beginners it's a bit difficult to use an all-out defensive team because you have to be really precise with your switches and your predictions because everything's pretty frail on your team. Like, you can have tanky attackers and stuff like that, but yeah, so I just made a really balanced team that beginners should have an easy time with. So next up are the tiers. Just really quickly, there are 5 main tiers, like Uber. These are Pokemon that are too strong in the other tiers, mostly legendary Pokemon. So for example, Rayquaza is there, Dialga, Mewtwo, stuff like that. Then there's Overused, just Pokemon that are used really, really often, like Scizor, Skarmory, Infernape, stuff like that. Then there's UU, you know, underused, rarely used, and never used. So yeah, the usage of the Pokemon becomes less and less. So why do I like NU so much? Well, you have the biggest diversity upon all tiers because there's over 200 pokes, and most tiers generally have around 50 Pokemon. So yeah, of course you can say in higher tiers you are allowed to use lower tier Pokemon, but like if you're gonna use a never used Pokemon in Ubers, you're probably gonna have a bad time because it's never used for a reason mostly. So yeah, you are better off choosing Pokemon in your respective tiers. So that's why never used is the most interesting in my opinion, because it has so many pokes and so much room for creativity, you know? There are so many Pokemon, so there are so many options to choose from. Like many Pokemon have bad stats but a huge move pool, so you can surprise the opponent every time, and it's just really cool. So yeah, rarely seen Pokemon that there as well. Like you can use stuff like Shackle and it might even work, or if you like Pikachu really much, which I don't like it personally, but that's another thing. So you can just use your favorite Pokemon and you don't have to worry about them being bad, because in never used, like, there are good and bad Pokemon, but you can make pretty much everything work if you have the right support to back them up. And thrilling and quickly shifting metagame, maybe a bit too much, but yeah, it's a really interesting metagame, and it's mostly offensive at the moment, but it changes really quickly and new threats are discovered, and yeah, it's just really interesting. So without any further ado, let's go into the never used team building for beginners. That is, I added that because you probably won't play with a team like that exactly on the 2000 rank points level, but this is just for beginners who just start and need to know the general facts about Pokemon. So first of all, you're gonna need a fast physical sweeper. What is a sweeper? A Pokemon that's most of the cases pretty fragile but fast and deadly on the physical side. So a Pokemon that dishes out a lot of damage but mostly can't take a lot itself. So this is to break through common walls and stuff like that, and examples are listed here, like Zog, pretty good fighting type. Primeape is like a bit like Zog but just faster and has U-turn but less power. Swallow, of course, with the Toxic Orb, it's a really powerful Pokemon that you need to check for. Braviary is another good example, Pinsir, Tauros, and so on and so on. Secondly, you're gonna need a fast special sweeper. This is pretty much the same thing as the physical sweeper, just on the special side, so you can dish out powerful special moves in order to crush the opponent. Yeah, Kadabra is a good example, Haunter, Jinx, Charizard, Rotom, all pretty frail but amazing offensively. So yeah, third of all, the physical walls, you need a Pokemon to check the fast physical sweeper. Like for example, if you don't have something that can take a Swallow, you're just gonna get swept by it because it's gonna defeat every single Pokemon on your team, unless you have really good priority, but that's not the point right now. So you need a good physical wall. That's generally a Pokemon with a lot of HP and defense and good status moves. For example, you can use Toxic on the enemy so that it doesn't matter that your attack isn't that as high, to poison the enemy, and yeah, they often set up useful things for your team, so they can either heal other stuff or regenerate themselves, use moves like Stealth Rock, or cripple the enemies with status moves while taking a lot of damage. Special Wall, pretty much the same thing, just on the special side. You know, you need to check for the physical and special sweepers, otherwise, yeah, you're gonna get swept. Guess what? The fifth point here is a mixed wall. So a Pokemon that can take both physical and special hits. Like for example, there are Pokemon that are not just special or physical sweepers, but both. For example, Samurott can be physically or specially offensive, so you never know. You know, you can't just switch in a special wall against it and then it uses a really strong physical move and deals over half damage, and then you're pretty much screwed already. So you kind of need a mixed wall at the beginning, and good examples would be Mandibuzz, Miltank, Probopass, Lickilicky, Bastiodon, Mischievous. These Pokemon can really take hits on both sides and retaliate back. A good example of a mixed wall is also Musharna. I didn't list that here, but that's a good Pokemon as well. And sixth, that the offensive tank. That's pretty useful for a beginner's team because these Pokemon, not only can they take a lot of damage because they're mostly invested in HP and attack most of the time, but they also can dish out a lot of damage. They're just not as fast. So yeah, they take a hit and then they retaliate back with more power. So Golem is a good example. Gigalith, yeah, sure. Gigalith. Golurk, Torterra, Piloswine, Seismitoad. These can take a lot of damage and also dish out a lot of it, and mostly these set up entry hazards as well, but we're gonna get to that a bit later. And lastly, in my opinion, a good beginner's team should also have a Cleric. A Cleric is a Pokemon that can heal the entire team from status diseases, so they use either Heal Bell or Aromatherapy. Good examples are Lickilicky, Miltank, Meganium, and Ampharos, and as you can see, these Pokemon most of the time are defensive, so that they can take a hit, then use their Heal Bell or stuff like that, and then switch out with a lot of HP. So yeah, then you need a Stealth Rock user, and yeah, the Stealth Rock is pretty much the best move in the game. It sets up entry hazards, and every time an enemy Pokemon switches in, it's gonna lose HP, and that is determined by its weakness or resistance towards the rock type. So, for example, Charizard is weak both to because he's flying and fire. He's 4 times weak to Stealth Rock or Rock, so he loses half HP upon entering if Stealth Rocks are up, and they remain on the field unless you spin them away. So, and not a lot of Pokemon can use Rapid Spin, which is a move where you can spin away entry hazards with. So Stealth Rock is really essential, because if you don't have the rocks up, the opponent can switch around all he wants, and yeah, so you're gonna punish him for switching essentially by using Stealth Rocks. Also, Grounded Poison type is really useful because Toxic Spikes are a threat. They poison everything that comes in, and if you bring a Grounded Poison type in, so a Pokemon that is on the ground, so Haunter, that's not the case for Haunter because he has Levitate. Yeah, it just removes the T-Spikes. And a Scarfer, in my opinion, is really good for beginners as well, because Choice Scarf is an item that boosts your speed by 50%, but you're locked into one move. But if you switch out, you can re-choose the move. So yeah, you kind of lock yourself in, but you need a Scarfer at the beginning to revenge kill enemies and to yeah, pretty much deal with physical or special sweepers that your walls cannot deal with. And it's also really good to sweep late game, because you just outspeed everything and strike it down with a powerful move. So lastly, a priority move. Priority, like, normally the faster Pokemon attacks, but if you have a priority move, you always attack first unless the enemy uses one of those as well. So these are really good against Scarfers, against fast sweepers with not a lot of HP, and also against the Pokemon Riolu, which can use a really annoying strategy because it has the ability Prankster, so it always moves first with moves that don't inflict damage. So it can use Roar and then use Copycat, because yeah, Roar normally moves last, but with Prankster you can use Copycat in order to always go first with Roar, and then they just Roar drags your Pokemon out, so you're forced to switch when the enemy uses Roar, and well, this way you're just gonna get crippled by Stealth Rocks because it's gonna use Copycat 100 times, and priority moves, like, they pretty much stop that. So lastly, I listed some optional things. So you can run a Spinner. A Rapid Spin is a move that removes all entry hazards, so Stealth Rocks, Spikes, and Toxic Spikes, so that you don't have to worry about those once switching in. The problem in NU is that most Spinners are not that good, and like, yeah, War Turtle, Torkoal, and Armaldo are the most popular Spinners, but they're not really good. Like, they would be really bad if they didn't own the move Rapid Spin, and still they're kind of iffy. So yeah, you need a Spinner if you have a lot of Stealth Rock weaknesses. So if you run a Charizard, a Swallow, or Regice, you probably should run a Spinner, because otherwise the entry hazards are just gonna cripple you too much. You can also run additional hazards like toxic spikes and spikes, but in this case you need a spin blocker, because you see rapid spin is a normal type move, so if you switch in a ghost type on that, rapid spin doesn't have any affection on ghost types, because of course normal doesn't affect ghost types. So yeah, the move cannot be fulfilled, and well, the entry hazards are still up. So yeah, also you can run the choice band or choice specs. So these are essentially like choice scarf. They just boost attack or special attack. So you can run those. I like to on beginners teams, because it's like a really good way to crush walls and stuff like that. And lastly, you can use a setup move. So that's a move that boosts an offensive stats. So for example, sword stance boosts your attack by 2 stages. So if you switch in on a Pokemon that can't harm you, you can set up a sword stance or an agility, nasty plot, shell smash, whatever, and then attempt to sweep the enemy's team. So you could use one of those, but it's just optional in my opinion, for a beginner's team that is. So yeah, that's gonna cover everything for this episode. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment and I will answer them 100%, so you can ask me really anything, even if you think the answer is really stupid, or if you didn't catch anything I said, because as you can probably hear, English is not my native language, so if you didn't understand anything, just feel free to ask me and I'm gonna answer you. So in the next episode we're gonna build a concrete team, and also we're gonna battle with it. So I'm gonna link a website called smogon.com in the description, and there you can find everything you need to know about the Pokemon. So you can look up their movesets, which types are effective against what. You can look up the tiers, which Pokemon are played often, pretty much anything. And the battling option that we have is also there. It's called Pokemon Showdown, so you can check that out as well. I will leave a link to that in the description as well. So that's all for this episode. I hope you like it, and well, I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode. Hope you guys are too, because this is just dry theory here, but in the next episode things are gonna get juicy. We're gonna build teams and we're gonna battle. So yeah, look forward to that, and well, this is Ingus signing out. Bye.